It was one of those nights when the rain seemed relentless, pounding against the windows as though the sky itself was in mourning. Ellie had always loved the rain, finding its rhythmic patter soothing, especially when she curled up in bed with a good book. But tonight was different. Tonight, the rain felt oppressive, as if it were trying to drown out something far more sinister. Ellie lived alone in a small cottage at the edge of town, nestled between the woods and a river that often swelled during storms like this. She had moved here to escape the chaos of the city, seeking solitude and peace. And for the most part, she had found it. Until tonight. As she lay in bed, the sound of the rain mingled with another noise, faint at first but growing louder, a tapping, insistent and steady. Ellie tried to dismiss it as a branch tapping against the window, but a quick glance outside revealed nothing but darkness and sheets of rain. The tapping continued, rhythmic and purposeful, as if someone or something was trying to get her attention. Ellie's heart began to race. She pulled the blankets up to her chin, her eyes darting around the room. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, and she realized with a jolt of terror that it was coming from inside the house. Her breath hitched as she forced herself to sit up. The hallway outside her bedroom was dark, the shadows seeming to stretch and writhe with a life of their own. The tapping was coming from the kitchen. Summoning every ounce of courage, Ellie slipped out of bed, her bare feet making no sound on the cold floor. She moved slowly, trying to quiet her racing heart, trying to convince herself that there was a logical explanation for the noise. The kitchen was empty. The tapping had stopped, leaving only the sound of the rain hammering against the windows. But as Ellie turned to leave, she heard it again, this time, coming from the basement. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She had never liked the basement, with its creaking stairs and musty smell, but she had to know what was making that noise. The basement door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The tapping had resumed, louder now, echoing up the stairs. Ellie hesitated, gripping the handrail tightly, before slowly making her way down. The air grew colder with each step, the smell of damp earth filling her nostrils. At the bottom of the stairs, she paused, straining to hear. The tapping had stopped again, replaced by a low whispering sound, as if a group of people were murmuring just out of sight. Her skin prickled with fear, but she forced herself to move forward, her hand groping for the light switch. The dim bulb flickered to life, casting long shadows across the basement floor. In the corner of the room stood an old wooden chest, covered in dust and cobwebs. Ellie had never seen it before. She felt a strange compulsion to approach it, her fear warring with a morbid curiosity. The whispers grew louder as she neared the chest, the words indistinguishable but filled with malice. With trembling hands, she reached out and lifted the lid. Inside the chest lay an old, tattered book bound in cracked leather. The whispers stopped abruptly as soon as she touched it, replaced by an eerie silence. The air seemed to grow heavier, pressing down on her as she opened the book. The pages were filled with strange symbols and incomprehensible text, but as Ellie stared at them, they began to shift and change, forming words she could understand. A story began to unfold on the pages, a story of a cursed book, a book that trapped the souls of those who read it, binding them to the will of a dark entity. Ellie's hands shook as she read, her breath coming in short gasps. The words seemed to pulse with a life of their own, drawing her in, making her feel as though she were sinking into the pages. She tried to tear her eyes away, but the book held her in its thrall, the words wrapping around her like chains. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the basement into darkness. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent, swirling around her, filling her ears with their venomous words. The book began to glow faintly, the symbols on the pages writhing as if alive. Ellie screamed and dropped the book, stumbling back. The whispers rose to a deafening roar, and she felt a cold, invisible hand grip her wrist, pulling her towards the chest. She struggled, her heart pounding in her chest, but the force was too strong. The chest seemed to loom larger in the darkness, its lid open wide as if ready to swallow her whole. With a final, desperate burst of strength, Ellie yanked her wrist free and fled up the stairs, the whispers chasing her, nipping at her heels like hungry wolves. She slammed the basement door shut and collapsed against it, her chest heaving with fear. The whispers faded, replaced by the sound of the rain once more. For a long time, Ellie sat there in the darkness, her body trembling, her mind reeling from what she had just experienced. The tapping had stopped, the whispers were gone, but the sense of dread lingered, a cold knot of fear lodged deep in her chest. She knew she could never go back into that basement, could never touch that cursed book again. But she also knew that whatever evil she had awakened would not be so easily dismissed. As the storm raged outside, Ellie climbed back into bed, pulling the covers tightly around her. She lay there, wide-eyed and shivering, listening to the rain, waiting for the whispers to return.